So next video is a game I played myself in the German Bundesliga against Lubomir Fatachnik. And it's a nice game to illustrate what could happen when you're facing a novelty. But also what happens if your pieces are not well placed, and particularly the knight on the edge of the board. So in fact I was lucky to get in some nice home preparation in Lubomir's favorite opening, the Grunfeld. He's considered to be a big expert on these lines. I didn't particularly prepare for this specific game, but I had done some work before, so I skipped the first couple of moves. It's may coming as a surprise for you, but it's all kind of theoretical relevant. So we have this position after move 11, knight d4. The situation has calmed down a bit after like hectic opening with a lot of knight moves. The knight has found a nice place on d4, and it's a bit annoying me, hindering my development. But the question is how to continue. The main line is knight f3, but then after bishop g4, at some point it's likely that things are getting exchanged on f3, and it's not too much for white. A lot of draws in this line. That's what I had figured out, because, well, trading of pieces is also helping black to get rid of his lack of space. So this is something I didn't consider. But when studying an opening, I was also trying to think from, hey, okay, I have a space advantage thanks to my pawn on d5. I would like to keep pieces on the board. So I came up with a novelty. This is what I had prepared at home. The move h3 may look like completely innocent, and objectively it doesn't bring white an advantage in my opinion, but it's an interesting new idea to put my opponent under some problems and try to let him think himself rather than making all his moves without thinking. So when you're facing a novelty, it's also important to understand what is going on, because such a move like h3 is also a waste of time. So on one hand it prevents the bishop from getting to g4, but on one hand, okay, it's not a developing move, so I lose time. And usually when you want to punish your opponent for making such moves, opening the position is often a good idea. So during the game I failed to remember my own analysis, but actually the move e5 is actually quite interesting. I think if you can get your pawn to e5, that would give some extra support to the knight. Well, after, let's say, taking en passant, I think black is actually interested in sacrificing a pawn, and suddenly things are getting very sharp, and I'm not really sure this is what white is really aiming for, because now the pawn is no longer on d5. You can actually consider getting your other knight to c6, get a bishop out, get the rooks to the central files, and although you can win a pawn by taking on f7 with check, still white is also in the process of completing development, and with such a powerful knight there are also a lot of tactical opportunities for black. So I think e5 could be a nice way of responding to my move h3. I'm not forced to take on e6, of course, and perhaps I could play bishop e3, but then I believe that the move e5 was also kind of useful for black. My opponent castled, which is not a bad move, but now I wanted to play knight f3. Knight takes f3, and also here, question is how to capture on f3 back. I think the most natural move would be queen takes f3, but I found it a bit annoying that my king is still on e1. If I had already castled and could put my rooks on e1 and d1, I thought that I would be doing well. But during the game I was a bit concerned about the move queen a6, preventing me from castling. But okay, if you exchange queens, white could be just a little bit better here thanks to this pawn on d5, and you can connect your rooks, but it's not so much for white, I believe. So this is interesting, but bishop takes f3 is also worth considering. because now whenever you play a move like queen a6, I can respond with bishop e2. Here my opponent made a serious mistake, because he played his knight to a6, and of course knight goes very often to a6 in the Grunfeld, but I believe this is a mistake because the knight is not doing too well here. I believe that there are two other options which would make sense. First is knight d7. Of course you're temporarily blocking your bishop, but the idea is to come with your knight to e5. I believe the knight is nicely placed in the center. The other option is rook d8 to put some pressure on the d file, maybe follow up with e6 at some point, or even knight c6 and then bring the other knight to d4. But knight a6 is a serious mistake. But the question is how I'm continuing here next. And it should also be said that black could actually have taken on c3 and win a pawn. But my idea was to play king f1 and just put my king on g2. And in general, I don't think that it's really worth a pawn to give up your best piece on g7. I have a lot of active play, I have powerful bishops. This gives me plenty of compensation. So after knight a6, I decided to follow up with the same plan, king f1. And if you just play quietly with a move like bishop d7, I will play king g2. And I'm enjoying my position thanks to the pawn on d5. The rook will come into play to e1, hitting the backward pawn, and you can never really push your e-pawn because the diagonal will be opened and b7 will become vulnerable. And it should be said that your knight on a6 is actually very badly placed. You can hardly ever go to c5 because there are ideas with b4. So, okay, in the game my opponent went for the move e5, and of course he is hoping that after d takes e6, he can play bishop takes e6. He's ready to give up his pawn on b7, sacrificing a pawn so he can activate his rooks. Rook is coming to d8. This is typical type of Grunfeld play black is looking for. So after e5, I go for the move bishop to e3. And I think that I'm having a very nice position because after the move f5, okay, his pawns on e5 and f5, they are looking impressive. But in fact, they are not dangerous at all. I put the king on g2, so my king is safe again. And the problem is that black can hardly ever push his pawns. Because, for example, if you play f4, you can just take, and I will play bishop d4. And my king is just much safer than his king, especially when my queen is coming on d4. I will be quick in occupying the central files. I can push my pawn. So this is very, very promising for white. But also if you push the other pawn, let's say you play e4, I will play bishop e2. And by playing your move e4, well, you lose your dynamical opportunities on the king side. And I have a nice blockade on the dark squares. And once again, this knight on a6 is just terribly misplaced. So he goes bishop d7. And now I actually make nicely use of the fact that my rook is on h1. And I insert this move h4. I think it's a good move, because if you try to improve your knight now, for instance, I will play h5, and now I get typical attacking play, and I have ideas of trading off the dark squared bishops, and my rook is excellently placed to join the attack. So Lubomir went for h5, but this is also a big concession, because it also further weakens the king side. And my play is simple, because I want to play with all my pieces, and I go for rook to c1. He goes for rook c8, and not much seems to be going on here. It's an interesting battle. But once again, I believe the difference is made now in the position of the knights, because the knight on a6 is really struggling. I play the move d6, and this is a very good move. I open the diagonal, so threatened to take the pawn. Black went e4, and now I go bishop e2. Bishop e2, and well, I would like to centralize my queen, for instance, but then there's queen b3, and I win the pawn on b7, and then after capturing the pawn, knight is also quite vulnerable. So that's not possible. But if you play bishop e6, which is what happened, I felt that I should now try to play for the initiative, and I found a very nice way of increasing the problems on my opponent, as I went for the move b4, attacking the queen. The point is that I would like to secure the d5 square for my knight. But if you play a move like queen e5 to prevent me from playing that move, there is bishop f4, queen d4, and I will play knight b5. And okay, queens can be exchanged, but my rook is coming into play. I have a fantastic passed pawn, knight is bad, and pawn on a7 is hanging. So that's not really recommended, but the alternatives aren't much better either. For instance, if you go back to d8, try to block the pawn, I will bring my knight to d5. And this is a nice move. My knight is centrally placed, threaten knight e7. And if you go king h7, there are also ideas to sacrifice on h5. So this is also one of the key ideas of having included the moves h4 and h5. I believe it's definitely white's favor. Of course, another point is that queen takes d6 runs into knight check, and I win the queen. So yeah, everything is looking quite nice for white. Black decided to take on a3, and I continue my plan with knight d5. So for instance, if you go rook d8, you don't want to exchange rooks. I come up with this move bishop takes h5, and this is a huge blow. Suddenly black's king is very unsafe, because after g takes h5, there is knight e7 check, king f7, queen takes h5, and the king is in trouble. King f6, and I go bishop d4, and this is just game over. So black decided to take on c1. Bishop takes c1, attacking the queen, of course. Queen a2, and now everything comes with tempo as I play knight e7 check. And for instance, if you go king f7, I will take on h5 again, g takes, queen takes, king f6, and before the king escapes via e5, I just play bishop f4, and it's going to be mate on g5 or on g6 very soon. So that's game over. So my opponent went king h7, but I will go anyway, bishop takes h5. And look at this position, because I am dominating on all sides of the board. Particularly this knight on a6 is just a hopeless spectator. So bishop takes h5. Of course you cannot take, because it will lead to checkmate. So bishop f7 played. And now I think I could just have returned with my bishop to e2. And then intending to play h5. I played a bit more complicated with d7. Now after g takes h5, the idea was to get a queen, take on d8. And now actually black could have defended more stubbornly with knight takes b4, knight takes f5. And there is this move queen e2, which is kind of annoying, because you are intending knight d3 and queen f3 and all sorts of counterplay. Perhaps it's still winning for white, but not that simple over the board. So that's why on move 27 I could have better played bishop e2. It's just a safer move. But I thought I was winning anyway. I basically anticipated his move queen e6. But now I'm in time to bring my last force into play with move rook d1. I believe I save important tempo, because I don't want to keep my pawn on b4. It's not that important. I'm just about to bring my rook into the attack. So, for example, if bishop f6, I would play bishop g5, securing my pieces, and taking on e7 leads to just a lost endgame. And if you take on g5, I will take on g5. If you try to counter with e3, actually things are not so dangerous, because it's only one check. And after king h2, yeah, there are a lot of mating threats, especially with rook to h6. So my opponent took on b4. Finally the knight is getting into play, but it's all coming very late. I play rook to d6. If you play queen e5, I had the idea of playing bishop f4, another tempo, queen b5, and queen d7. And it feels like black's resistance is broken here, because pawn on f5 can be taken. Pawns are quite vulnerable. So this is quite hopeless for black. But my opponent went queen c4, hoping for counterplay. And, well, indeed, if you take on f5, there are ideas with knight d3. And there are some perpetual ideas with knight e1 and maybe queen f1 or knight f3. Apparently, you can still play bishop d2, which is winning, which I missed. But queen d7 is actually a much better move because I'm hitting his weakness on f5. He went knight to d3, doesn't have much of a better choice. And after queen takes f5, king h8, rook d8, bishop f8, rook takes f8, king g7, it's game over. But bishop h6 is a cute finish, after which he resigned, because after king takes, I will just play queen f6, king h7, and checkmate on h8. Of course, not all part of the game was completely relevant for the topic of a knight being out of play, but you see that such problems, having a one misplaced piece, it often leads to more problems in the long run. That's what you see in this case, as black had a lot of problems coordinating his forces. He lost control over the center, and I could nicely combine threats on all sides of the board. On the king side, starting with the move h4, but also the move b4 was very nice, launching my knight to d5 with a devastating effect. All possible because the black knight was not well placed on the edge of the board and was certainly missed, helping the other pieces to control the center. So, interesting game in my opinion. Of course, I was very happy with this victory, but I believe also a nice lesson for your general understanding of opening play, and you will get to see also more examples where misplaced pieces can be exploited by playing on the other wing, or even exploited in a more tactical way.